We're going to talk about the elections coming up in May, but I thought to start that we could talk about Labour's reputation and how Labour could improve the way it maybe has its reputation with local government. There are some negative stories about Labour, and I think a positive story about Labour's running of local government comes from Hammersmith and Fulham Council. Stephen Cowan, you're the leader of Hammersmith and Fulham Council, and the problem that lots of local authorities face is the budget keeps being cut. How far has your budget been cut since 2010, for example?
So in 2010 it was £184 million. We're a small West London borough, and this year we've just signed off a budget for £124 million. And within that 11 years, the government has also given us a whole bunch of new responsibilities, and the demographic profile of the borough has changed slightly. People have got older and therefore need more social care, which is any council will tell you. But most of the budget you have as a council goes on looking after looking after children who've been brought into care. A single child can cost you £250,000, £500,000. As you know, we flew social workers into Europe to rescue child refugees, so that's a big cost to us, but we're very happy we've done it. And then there's other people who need social care, dementia sufferers, people who have disabilities. And as you know, we're the only council in England who have abolished charges for adult social care. So they're big cuts, and yet the costs have gone up.
And obviously you have a problem with council tax, because you can't put council tax up a great amount because you won't, obviously people won't vote for you, will they? So what have you done with in Hammersmith and Fulham to make sure that you can run those services, and also how have you shown your efficiency? Because the thing is, the Conservatives are always banging on about how efficient they are with money and how Labour is inefficient. It seems to me, from what I've heard, that Hammersmith and Fulham has actually shown up the Tories for being inefficient, and as a result of that, you've won, is it 3 consecutive local elections? 2. All right, well, it will be 3. You've won 2 consecutive local elections against the flagship borough of David Cameron, in the flagship borough of David Cameron. So can you tell people how you've managed to show up the Tories' inefficiency, and also how you've been able to apply socialist Labour values while you've done that? Because I spoke to you and you said that everyone who works for the council is on a living wage at least, and you've got the backing of trade unions, so you've managed to be efficient without actually ruining the lives of lots of people. So would you let, because what we've got in after you're on, we've got lots of people standing for council. It'd be good if they could hear how you've done this.
Yeah, I guess probably we should set the electoral scene, which is Hammersmith and Fulham. Fulham, was known as David Cameron's favourite council. If you Google that, we still come up, I think. And added to that, you had we were considered unwinnable. The Labour Party wrote us off, said back in 2014 we could never win Hammersmith and Fulham. And indeed, one of my favourite moments was when the chief of police told me after we'd won that he found out because Special Branch called him. And I was like, oh God, what did I do in my youth that made Special Branch call the chief of police and I'd become the council leader? And it was because David Cameron's victory rally had been cancelled in Hammersmith the day after the election. So they didn't see it coming. We had a landslide. And we had a landslide against the council that if you drove into it or crossed the border on a bicycle, you would see the sign, Hammersmith and Fulham, the low tax borough. So the Tories made a real thing about council tax. They'd cut council tax more than any other council in Britain, 3% every year they'd been in office. To be fair to them, and I hate being fair to them, but to be fair to them, Tories believe in a small state. They don't believe in a big state. They really are very ideological. They're like a religious movement in terms of shrinking the size of the state, and so cutting its services is what they think is the right thing to do. And we disagree with them fundamentally across our movement on that front. But that was what we were up against: a small state, tax cutting, arguing they were financially efficient. And we had a long time. I was leader of the opposition for 8 years. And what was very clear is if we were going to fight them on council tax, we were going to lose. No one, whether it's the Democrats of the United States or whether it's Social Democrats in Germany, have won the argument that pay more tax is a good thing since the Thatcher-Reagan smashed the consensus 40, 50 years ago. So winning elections is a lot about picking the battlefield you're going to fight on. And we did not want to fight on council tax, but we also recognised that people didn't trust us. And we get ourselves very tied up in politics about left, right, and the politics. But we often forget the psychology of how people vote. And we were of the view that, if you look at that sort of classic Maslowian hierarchy of needs, people felt unsafe with us as an alternative because they didn't trust we'd be safe with their money. Now, I'm talking about Hammersmith and Fulham, but there's bits of the country, particularly in England, that are very similar, where people just don't trust us with the money. So we went out to make good financial management a Labour thing. I've been doing it for a long time. If we're honest, councils can be wasteful. So we took the view of looking at how we keep our values, looking after our workers, maintaining amazing services, and dealing with issues like child poverty and pensioner poverty and all the other things that can affect someone in another setting. They were the priorities, but we would therefore modernise the organisation. We've taken out £118 million of wasteful council spending in 7 years, which is a record, which we put on leaflets. We've cut £118 million of wasteful council spending because we're saying, our message is we're modernising an old-fashioned bureaucracy and therefore prioritising frontline services, which is why we're rescuing child refugees, why we're free breakfast for all school children in primary schools, building 2 new youth clubs, putting 74 law enforcement officers on, which will work for the council to patrol our streets, to make people feel safer, particularly in the light of what's happened with Sarah Everard, and lots of other things. So we're making a sort of more, an exception, and we're doing more for less. Now, some of that has been helped by the fact that we took in a very tough line with property developers, because I used to teach negotiation for a living, and I don't take any hospitality. You never see me sitting down for dinner with a property developer, we ban lobbyists from coming to see us, and we negotiate pretty hardball. And to a degree, that's a London thing because developers want to build in London. So we have an advantage there. But actually, I'm still quite proud that we've cut £118 million of wasteful spending. And I think it's important for Labour, in the psychology of how we talk to voters, of saying to voters, we will be safe with your money, we will be custodians of your money, and we will exercise our social democratic values and socialist values, and do amazing things. But first base, you can trust us. And I think it's like any relationship, we have to tell voters, you can trust us on the stuff you don't trust us on at the moment. And we've made an effort, possibly because we were written off, but I think we've made an effort because we think it's the right thing to do, but we own the efficiency agenda.
Can I just come in, because I'm aware of the time a little bit, but the thing that I've gathered from my experience and from speaking to you as well is that officers of councils tend to be given much more power than they should have, and many councillors who come in are not able to deal with some of the, like you'll talk about, negotiations with people, to make those efficiencies that you're talking about. Do you think Labour should train councillors, people who are going to be councillors or councillors, more in how to deal with officers?
Yeah, I think
there seem to be lots of, for example, in London, there's lots of developers are making vast sums of money, and hardly any money's coming back into the community from that. And you seem to have changed that round in Hammersmith and Fulham.
Yeah, I think there's we cut layers of management. We had some of the highest paid. We had one consultant who was brought, who'd been the chief exec of Bexley Council, who'd retired on full salary pension because he was permanently unfit to ever work again. And 2 weeks later started working for us at £1,000 a day consultant, who's under the Tories, with the job of selling off our council estates. And, there was a lot of stuff like that went on. So we took out a lot of that, cancelled an awful lot of consultancy contracts. We took out layers of expensive management. And we business process re-engineered some stuff. Like, we had a very harsh approach to homeless people under the Tories, where if you didn't fill in the right form, you'd get an eviction letter. Your housing benefit would be cut, you get an eviction letter. And that then meant you would then have another team who would evict you, and then you'd have another team who would deal with your homeless application because you've been made homeless. And that was very expensive as well as cruel. So we decided to, if someone hadn't filled in a form, to go and knock on their door and see if they needed help filling in a form. And it not only was kinder, it saved us a load of money because it allowed us to get rid of all the other teams and dealt with the failure of some horrendous personal circumstance where people had been evicted because they hadn't built housing benefits for them. So there was lots of ways you can save money. We cut 5 million quid from the propaganda budget. If you'd come to Hammersmith and Fulham, you've seen pictures of councillors hanging from the lamppost with political messaging on. We cancelled all of that, and it was very popular. So there's loads of ways you can cut just silly council spending, because in many ways, but you've got to go in with your own ideas, which sort of answers your question. There's a lot of council officers who are used to running the show and don't expect councillors to get into the detail. So we really did get very involved with the detail. Why are you spending this? Why have we got 2 departments doing the same thing? And we reduced the spending, allowed us to introduce stuff like the London Living Wage, but it also allowed us to radically improve a number of frontline services. Now, I say that because it becomes a point where you can make so many efficiency cuts, but you've still got a Tory government who doesn't believe in government and is slashing the size of local government with huge levels of economically incompetent and cruel austerity. So, but our message, I think, because you framed this, how do we get into the elections? We can't let the Tories be the party. The Tories that gave 22 billion quid in PPE contracts, we can't let those idiots, those incompetent, financially corrupt in some cases, conservatives, dominate the finance agenda. It's just simply wrong. We have to own the finance agenda if we're to make people feel secure about voting Labour. And
you said you spoke to John McDonnell about this, and he thought you were on a good thing.
Yeah, he was very kindly helped us with the West Kens and Gibbs Green estates. The Tories had sold them off. Now, this is a good example, actually. I think I mentioned it last time. This was a 12.05 billion scheme known as the Earls Court scheme. And the Conservatives sold a third of the land to go into that scheme, which happened to be 760 people's council homes, 760 separate council homes, thousands of people's council homes. They sold that off for 110 million quid. And they actually also took on obligations for us to legally have to buy back the freehold and leasehold flats. So it would have bankrupted the council. And John came down to have a look at this and see what we could do to fight this disgraceful action by the former administration. And we got talking about the fact that we'd negotiated 685 million quid off developers in the 5 years we've been in office. And he agreed with me. Quite often the public sector just doesn't know how to negotiate, and therefore you get ripped off by very sharp people in the private sector whose one skill set is knowing how to negotiate. Yeah. And you see that at the time.
Well, thank you for coming on. So we've got 6 candidates for local elections. I've got to get them into 5 minutes. So let's see how quickly they can do it. I'm only joking. I can't possibly do that in 5 minutes. Thank you, Steve, for coming on. Good to see you. Cheers. I'm going to start. These are 6 fantastic candidates standing in the May elections, and I'm going to start with Teresa Cullen, who's in
Who's
Broxtowe.
here? Broxtowe, yeah.
How you doing, Teresa?
Who's ever heard of Broxtowe? Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Well, it's a key marginal, so we should all know it. So, how do you feel? What you heard about Steve? What you heard from Steve about the cuts that the councils have had to work with, I suppose. How can Labour manage to run services with all that going on? And obviously there's more need at the moment with the COVID situation.
Yeah, well, he was right about, when I was listening to him, he was absolutely right when he said that they looked at what was the issue in Hammersmith and Fulham, and it was about the money. But it's not the same issue in every part of the country, and I think it's really important to remember that you know, we're not all in the same situation where the Conservatives are good with money and we're not good with money. So it's really hard at Nottingham. I'm standing for Nottinghamshire County Council. Nottinghamshire County Council has got no money already. There's not a load of wasteful things. And Nottinghamshire County Council was Labour for 24 years. And then it started swinging backwards and forwards. And it's been 4 years Labour, 4 years Tory, 4 years Labour, 4 years Tory. And we're trying to get it back again. And there's no money left. There's not cuts that can be made. So what we've got to do is differentiate ourselves in a different way. We've got to show that we're actually going to improve lives for people. We're a large swathe of Nottinghamshire is former coalfields area. It's red wall that's gone blue in the national, you know, in the general elections. So we've got to be for people what they need us to be. And in Nottinghamshire, it's not necessarily about the money. That makes sense.
So what issues do you think people want from Labour? What can Labour offer? What are you saying Labour's offer is, I suppose? Yeah,
well, it's tough, isn't it? Because we've got a manifesto, and I'll be honest with you, it's not necessarily a manifesto that proper socialists would think was a good manifesto to be running on. It is in parts. The environment is a big part of it, and doing a lot of stuff on the environment. Thing that I always say to people in meetings is, you know, people, you know, lovely middle class people like us, we want to talk a lot about the environment and about what we can do to improve the environment. But actually quite a lot of people, it's quite low down their agenda, because they're not worried about the environment. They're worried about surviving, getting food, being able to live from week to week. And it's got worse during the pandemic. So finding a way to actually speak to people about things that they understand. In Broxtowe, in our area, we've got to gain back 1,400, we've got to get another 1,400 votes to win. The Tories are that far ahead of us. And, but we're a key marginal because in the last election, the local election, we cut that massively. But we were riding on a high then. We were riding on a high because locally, we are, you know, we had the socialist ticket and people liked Corbyn locally. So we were doing quite well. People now are not so happy with Labour. So we're running our campaign very much on local, you know, very localised issues, using the community coordinators type role, where we're looking for micro issues really, like street by street by street, what's mattering to people on streets, and running little campaigns. We learned that from the Liberals. They do that all the time. Never gets them far, but we're hoping it'll get us a lot further.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting way of dealing with the street by street thing. I think that's a great idea. But I'd love to talk to you more. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
But I've got other things to do. Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Yeah. Can I just say though, before I go, what could people do to help us? We actually need more help with phone banking. We can't do canvassing, but people can phone bank for us from anywhere in the country. So, you know, if anybody wants to help me get elected, then, you know, get in touch and we can put you on phone banking sessions for us.
Okay.
There's my sales pitch.
Right, well done. Well done. I'm sure we'll get lots more of those. Dawn Smith is in Worthing. Are you there, Dawn?
Hello, Crispin. Yes, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Hi,
now,
morning.
I put out a call for who are the good local election candidates, and you got lots of reply people saying you're the one. So
No pressure then.
No pressure. So is this the first time you're standing?
First time for county council. I was elected as a borough councillor in the last round in 2019. I'm standing in the same ward, but obviously being county, it's a bigger division. But Worthing 4 years ago, it didn't have a single Labour councillor. We've now got 10, and we're in May looking to go to at least no overall control. So it's a lot of change on the sunny south coast. You know, this is Tory heartland here. Yeah. And we've made really big insteps into the area because we've got a great 2 CLPs, Worthing West and East Worthing in Shoreham, and we've got tons of activists. I joined under Corbyn when I first moved here. Labour wasn't really anything you really heard about, and we've just made inroads and inroads, and we keep it very local. We do ward specific campaigns. So I'm going for county council, like I said, and at the moment there's 70 councillors and 50 are Conservative. So we're not going to take county council, but what the county council needs is voices of opposition. And we're focusing on one big thing that they're doing, which is they're trying to close all the children and family centres. Now, you know, what was Sure Start set up under Blair. And they're trying to shut 32 of the 43 that we have. And that's a hell of a lot of services being cut. The council tax is going up by 5% and everything's being cut to the bone. So we're just trying to get some opposition voices in there because there's a severe lack of scrutiny. They're just not challenged. They've had it their way for years. And we just need more voices in there to say what you're doing is wrong. And that's what I'm trying to become one of. But in terms of borough level, we're actually trying to push to either take it or at least get to no overall control. And that in the space of 4 years is a hell of a lot of change in a Tory heartland. So we're doing really well down here. We're a real mixed bag of where we come from within the party. I'm originally from East London, Irish dad, raised in unions. I was a teacher. You know, I'm very much on the left. But I work with colleagues that aren't, but we are very, very focused on our community. We're embedded in our wards, and that's kind of the way we've managed to make it sort of happen here.
Great, that's great. I like the way you've built. I mean, Worthing sounds very Tory to me.
It is so Tory, but my ward, Crispin, is like a tale of two cities. It's called Broadwater, and you've got very high affluent upper house, you know, 6-bedroom houses, swimming pools. We've got all of that, and then we've got estates with severe. We've got children, 30% poverty in this ward. Worthing has got a lot of the coastal town issues that. You know, we're in a very, very affluent county, but we've got a very sort of deprived bubbles within it. And there's no representation in the county council. People, they're just not heard. People with children with special needs, I've got one. You just don't get anywhere. You're constantly fighting systems. And to take away the children's centre is going to affect so many of our families. So that we're really, really keeping our campaign local, and I'm really trying to oust a Tory that's been in for years. So if anybody does want to help, I'll put my details in the chat box. Dialogue, like the previous lady said, is a great way of doing things. We're not starting physical canvassing here till the 6th of April. But if anyone local wants to come and physically knock doors, get in touch. I'll drop my email in for anyone to get in touch. And yeah, dialogue, you can be anywhere. And you can ring up. It is a target ward. We are severely lacking representation at the county level in West Sussex. So I'd appreciate any support.
Good pitch, very good pitch.
Thank you.
Right, okay, and Doina, Cornell, is in Stroud, and you were another candidate that was spoken highly of. Doina.
Hello. Right, there's been a lot going on, so it's just thinking, how do I begin? So I am actually leader of Stroud District Council down here in Gloucestershire, and we are actually been a no overall control council since 2012, but we've been running the council in a alliance, a cooperative alliance we call it. We don't like the word coalition, with the Lib Dems and the Greens, because they're a pretty diverse district. So in this election, we're standing on our track record. I think we're a small council compared to somewhere like Hammersmith, so we're quite fortunate in the fact we don't have to deal with social care, which is the thing that really clobbers councils. So our overall budget's around 15 million. But I think as a council, we're quite excited about our manifesto. I think our sort of ethos is around those investing in communities, and there's small scale changes that you can do to make a real difference. And a couple of the candidates have mentioned about that local side of things. You know, we're a district that's not necessarily obviously that would be Labour. I represent the town of Dursley, which is a small town. We've got rural communities as well, and absolutely one of the great strengths we've got was our team of candidates who are really seen as community leaders. So we've got that sort of politics here locally. So people, that's why people continue to support Labour, because they see Labour is really the only active voice in their communities, standing up for local people. The Conservatives and the other parties are just not there on the ground. So that's really important, and that's really what we're focusing on in this campaign. And what is really great is we've got some really good new younger candidates coming in. One of the big issues with local government is it tends to be sadly pale, male and stale. So trying to get that diverse group of candidates in is really important. And we do a lot of work to bring people in. I think it's been touched on the call, you know, where the Labour Party is currently, to hold people in the party and not let them not leave, because it's so important that we've got representation here on the ground in our communities. So just to give you a couple of examples of some of the stuff we're doing, obviously through the pandemic, we saw a great rise in mutual aid groups and people really supporting their local communities. And that was on the back of working with community organisations already before that, but that investment that we've done as a council to support some of those organisations paid off in the pandemic, because we already had built up really trusted relationships with people, and because we've got a Conservative controlled county council, which, as you know, as you can imagine, has just been cutting back on services. So what you've got now, unfortunately, and this is the tragedy, is that some people who are extremely vulnerable, who really need support, are really only held by those community organisations. The service is just not there as they were before, and being a relatively rural area as well, access to services, lack of public transport is extremely difficult for people. So what we're looking to do is to invest further in this, what we're calling this community hub model. That means that every part of the district, whether it's a small or large community, will have a local organisation that's there to help. And it's not necessarily always about throwing tons of money at things. It's just getting that right bit of investment in. And the important part as well, being Labour grassroots, it's not top down. And I think there's been a move in local government, generally speaking. What's working is not about imposing, thinking you know best and sticking the solutions onto people. It's about working with communities, seeing what works locally, and then that way you build up more resilience. Because if you just try to bring something in, it may not last. And so this is what we're really trying to see. I think that's quite a key part of our manifesto going forwards. Is it's got to be people first, and also we're one of the only council actually in Gloucestershire which has its own housing stock. We've been building first council to build council houses in a generation in this part of the world, and again making sure our tenants are at the heart of our services and building really decent homes. Again, as probably is the case everywhere, isn't it? Lack of affordable housing is a real major issue, and to keep our communities vibrant. And the other thing I'll say is, you know, what are we going to do about our high streets and our local economy? That's also a really key part of our manifesto, because everyone has taken such a clobbering through the pandemic. We've got lots of small businesses. We want to keep jobs. We want to keep things local, and also we want to ensure that businesses do the right thing, that they treat their workers fairly, and that we champion those businesses that are like that. And I think that's really important as well. So I think for us, all these things have come together around sort of our manifesto. I would say as well, what hasn't really been mentioned on the call and has become really in sharp relief over the last year is around equality. And what we've seen is the inequality in our country. Pandemic has really shone a spotlight on it. And, you know, Stroud has got nice leafy areas. It was just voted, I think it's today in the Sunday Times, the best place in the UK to live. But wow, you know, we've got beautiful countryside. We've got fantastic community. Stroud's also known, you know, founder Extinction Rebellion, fierce political stuff going on here. But that doesn't hide the fact there's severe inequality as well in our communities. And I think it was mentioned about, you know, using the story you touched on with the food bank. I mean, my town, I think one of our local community hubs is currently feeding about 3% of the population. You know, so many families have found themselves having to use the food bank who never had to go there before. So it's looking at equality. So where do we direct our resources most clearly to those people in those areas that need them? Because there's a lot of stuff out there in the rural areas which is quite masked and it's not necessarily obvious to people, but it exists. I've got to
move on. Sorry. Do you want to put your details in the chat and then people can?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stick my email in there, and if anyone wants to get in touch with me, happy to do that.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I just I realised I've got to move on. Holly Swales is in the northwest in Thornton, Cleveleys.
Hi, good morning.
In Thornton, Cleveleys, is that right?
Yeah, that's it. It's actually Thornton Cleveleys. So currently, I'm just going to recap on the little points which all I wanted to mention. Actually, I mean, you've covered all what I want to mention. So I'm a candidate in Cleveleys, South and Carlton, Lancashire County Council. There are a number of things which do need addressing in my area. There's quite a lot to tackle actually. But going back to the point that everybody has made, I'm in quite a conservative area. My opponent is a complete and utter waste of time, to put it in a nutshell, who does nothing for his local community. But I'm not going to go into a rant about that. So basically, much needs to be done, not only to maintain the services which Lancashire County Council provide, but we must protect everyone in our community. And that is where the cuts have been in our community for the most vulnerable in society. And all those things need bringing back. Lancashire Wellbeing, they were cut really badly a few years ago. Disabled transport for kids that want to go to school. I mean, how can you justify doing that? There is no justification in that whatsoever. I mean, obviously, when we come out of the COVID pandemic, we need to adjust our priorities and take a different path where the likes of poverty, homelessness and food banks become a thing of the past. I mean, you know, there is working people in my area that use the food banks. I mean, that shouldn't be the common theme going on here. You know, what is actually happening for that to be continuing? I mean, that is something that I want to eradicate. There is no excuse for that at all. So obviously I live in a rural area as well. So Lancashire Manifesto want to make it a cleaner, greener and safer environment. We want to protect green spaces. We've got the Tories who've allowed these green belts to be eroded by piecemeal housing developments. I mean, that is another thing that needs to stop. People's quality of life is totally been affected by that. You can't keep on building these expensive houses and have the maintenance of the roads. There's lack of schools, lack of doctors' surgeries, all these types of things. And then obviously in my area, we used to have the Fleetwood-Polton rail line. And I think that's vital to turn around decades of economic mismanagement. And instead of building a gas-fired power station in my nearby area, what we need to be doing is we need to maintain a suitable barrage across the River Wyre. The creation of well-paid high-tech jobs and encouraging employers back to the area will help create the inward investment. Investment is what is needed in this area. There is a complete lack of investment. I mean, I don't know what's been going on, but it's almost like I'm being brought to pick up the pieces. I mean, I'm the only female Labour councillor in Thornton. My real positive idea is to get as many Labour councillors in this area as I possibly can. Enough is enough. This has simply got to stop. You know, we've got children who are going to be chasing jobs, so they need the opportunity of apprenticeships. Obviously, the Lancashire Manifesto want to look at that as well. But all these things, we need to go back to grassroots Labour, and I am that person to do that. And those are the things that I want to push forward, completely push forward. There is no excuse for the Conservatives to be doing these cuts completely, day in, day out, at Wyre and Lancashire Council has simply got to stop.
Well, look, you've got my vote, definitely. I'm afraid I don't live in Wyre, so I can't help you there, but I would vote for you if I could. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
That was really fiery as well. I enjoyed it.
I need to be.
And I'm going to bring in Lucy Watson, who's standing in Scunthorpe. Are you there, Lucy?
I am. Hi, Crispin. Yeah, it's actually Broughton and Appleby, so it's a little rural area.
Oh, so, yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
So I'm standing in Broughton and Appleby on the North Links Council, which is a little rural area between Scunthorpe and Brigg. So I've got two Conservative MPs either side, obviously fighting their fight for the councillors. So yeah, it's a lovely area, absolutely brilliant being locked down in this area, and for people here too. We've been really lucky. As soon as lockdown started, we sort of, sourcing a food bank to help people. I've started a Good Neighbours scheme in the area to try and bring people together, because the problem with this area is the isolation. We've got a lot of elderly people who, and there's little pockets of isolation all over that, Tories aren't actually doing anything about. It's a Tory-led council, and they're very interested in their little vanity projects. So they've got one at the moment in Scunthorpe where they're doing a whole grassy area right outside their council offices, and the high street is going to pot. So, their priorities are all wrong. They're not putting the money into health and social care, what's needed, especially in this area. Transport links. There's all sorts of things that we could be doing. And the best thing about it is I know that for all the candidates that are on standing here now, we're completely transparent, we're open, we're not in it for anything other than making a difference and improving lives. And it's very difficult to work in this area and convince people of that, because they've got the narrative that we're in it for the money or we're in it for something. There's got to be some sort of motivation other than making a difference. So yeah, I'm really passionate about making a difference. I'm also a management accountant, so I have put on the leaflets that I will, analyse every expense and make sure it's going in the right place and work hard on that. So yeah, that's basically where I'm at.
Well, thank you for coming on. So we've got one more candidate, and he is standing in the Welsh Senedd elections, and it's Dylan. Dylan Lewis-Rowlands, are you there?
Yes, here I am.
Oh, good to see you. Now, I don't want to be ageist, but you're how old are you?
I'm 19.
19. Great. I mean, it's great to see someone at your age standing. So, and you've got the Welsh flag behind you. It's good to see a bit of flags. Tell us what your campaign's about, and how did you get active in the party, and what brought you to stand as well?
Yeah, so I'm 19, so I joined obviously in the Corbyn years. He really enthused me to join, and it was really impactful. And it wasn't just Corbyn; it was, I come from a South Welsh deep valleys mining community, so class struggle is not just part of my history, but it's part of my blood, and it's really been a kind of selling point throughout my life and throughout my community. So I've moved to Ceredigion, and I'm really proud to be standing in a community that has suffered. Not proud that they've suffered, but proud to be able to provide an alternative. Because here in Ceredigion it flip-flops between Plaid Cymru and between the Liberal Democrats. So you've very much got a centrist coalition here. So I'm really proud that I can stand in the communities of Ceredigion and provide a different socialist alternative to the problems that rural communities are facing.
And what's the situation in Wales with the COVID?
So the Welsh Labour government here in Wales are outperforming the Tories on basically everything. It's an evidence-led approach. That's the key here. It's not we're not focused on class warfare, class struggle. We're focused on ensuring that people stay alive. 52% of the Welsh Labour government's budget has gone on the NHS year after year. So it's even before this, we are seeing the massive investment the Welsh Labour puts in on NHS, and we've provided bonuses to NHS workers who've worked through this pandemic just to ensure they can still keep going, because they do put their lives on the line for us, and it's really, really vital that here in Wales that there is a Welsh Labour government that can stand up for the people, because on one hand you've got the Plaid Cymru nationalist nonsense who were focused on creating division. On the other hand, you've got the Tories who are more and more not just right wing but devo-sceptic as well, and want to destroy democracy here in Wales on a very national level, because the Welsh Labour government has worked for the people of Wales and has really shown the failings of the Tory government in Westminster.